Hello, everybody. Welcome to Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Thank you for coming to our program tonight. This is a pre-concert talk led by myself and composer Keith Sisterham. Keith is visiting from New York City. I picked him up from the airport 2 days ago? One day ago, wow. Just yesterday I picked him up from the airport. In our program tonight, which if you do not have program notes, you can locate those out in the lobby. There will be, you'll see that we're having a world premiere of a piece of music today. So I'd like you to give a hand for Keith. For this pre-concert talk, we will be having a brief conversation. We'll be opening it up for questions. And I will also be passing out just one copy of the score. So please peruse the score briefly and hand it safely to the next person you can find. And let's have the score go down this way and this way. With all that being said, I'd like to hand the mic to Keith now.
Good evening, and we'll say good morning, because this is, I think, my 5th or 6th cup of coffee since the beginning of today. We have to love jet lag a little bit. But it's very wonderful being here in Port Angeles. This is actually my first time ever on the West Coast, which is very exciting. My father grew up in Tacoma until he was about 9 or 10 years old, and then moved to Massachusetts, which is where I myself grew up. But beautiful nature here. Wonderful views of the mountains, something that we don't get much of in New York City. Obviously, we have mountainous buildings, but not a whole lot of naturally formed ones, unless you go further north. But yes, wonderful to be here. Thank you very much for having me. So this piece that I wrote for Noah, I believe I wrote, how many years ago? 3 years ago. Wow, already has been 3 years. And actually, I wrote this right about when I first moved to New York City. I was living in Hartford, Connecticut for quite a few years, which is how Noah and I met. Noah was working as a minister of music in a church in Suffield, Connecticut, which was not very far from Hartford, where I was living at the time and going to school. And we worked together for 4, 3, 5, 8 years. I don't know how long it's been. We had a talk earlier today where we both kept coming with different numbers for how many years we've actually known each other, and I don't think we ended up coming up with an exact number. But I wrote this about 3 years ago, 2019, September or October, when I first moved to New York, like I said, which was obviously very tumultuous time for everybody, because we are about to go into a global pandemic and wonderful lockdown that we all loved so very much. In New York, that just meant everyone stayed inside for about 4 months. And this was the lead up going into that. And so, of course, at the time when writing this, I didn't know that was going to happen, but I was looking for work, having a really hard time finding work after moving to the big old city, being a country boy. I was never a country boy. But just having a hard time finding my footing. And then eventually when I did in February of 2020, and I was so excited to finally find my footing, then the carpet got ripped out from underneath me, and I stayed sitting for another year after that. So this piece kind of came at a very interesting juncture of my life. And we let the piece sit for a very long time after that. Like I said, 3 years. I have never heard Noah perform this piece, in fact. I've heard small bits and pieces. I believe this morning actually was the first time I'd ever actually heard a section being played. So I'm very excited to hear the actual performance of it. But yes, what's wonderful about this piece is that it reconnected Noah and I after years of Noah moving out here, obviously, and me moving to New York. And it's obviously wonderful to work with you again. Yes, please take this from me.
I would like to add, so we do have a history of premiering new work together. I have 2 compositions that I've composed for choir where Keith was played soloist in. One is called Brief Blue Frost, and the other is a triptych for choir. and Keith has a wonderful voice. Additionally, I did write and compose and record a symphonic song cycle in which Keith played trombone for. So, I'm forgetting about that piece too. Yeah. So this piece came out of a desire to premiere new music by a living composer. And the piece is called Boxes. I think the score is out here somewhere. Keep it moving, keep it moving. We want everybody to get an opportunity to look at that score. So I'm gonna ask Keith to give a little bit more background about the form of the piece and where it came from, and then we will take questions with the raise of a hand. We have just a little bit of time for that.
So I have my own copy of the score. Oh, I do not want to join a personal hotspot, thank you. I have my own copy of the score here, so if you had the opportunity to take a look at it so far, then try to use your photographic memories to remember all the locations I'm about to start with. Back in, I want to say 2017, which is kind of a guesstimate, I had the opportunity to write a chamber orchestra score to an old silent film called A Trip to the Moon, 1902, by Georges Méliès. A very influential film in the history of cinema. A little outdated in some ways, but obviously, but also very much piqued my interest from a very young age. And so I had the opportunity at the Hart School, which is where I went to school. There was a concert series that one of the music theory professors was doing where he would, every month or so, he would improvise on piano, accompanying some short film, some silent film. And it was wonderful, and the end of the season was supposed to be a big chamber orchestra performance of this score. So I sat down, it must have been November, December, it was cold, obviously it was cold. And I wrote the entire piano reduction first, because that's just how I was organizing my thoughts, and I completely finished it. I was ready to orchestrate it and give it instrumentation, and I got the flu and strep throat at the same time. I was out of commission for 3 weeks before I was finally able to get out of bed consistently, and by that time I missed the deadline to actually submit the orchestration. It was very, very sad. Spent a lot of time working on that, and just felt like it kind of left my grasp. And so in this piece, I wanted to breathe a little bit of life into those old musical themes. So one of the big musical themes that you'll hear throughout is this da 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 da. It's supposed to be very big and sweeping. In the film score itself, it was meant to elicit this feeling of wonderment as you're traveling through space. And it was hinted at in various different places, and I loved that theme so much. I personally don't enjoy the process of writing melody. That's not something I like to do. I just like to form soundscape. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote a melody, and I actually like it. And I was very, very excited. And so I didn't want to just let that not live. So brought it into this piece. You will hear it in many different forms and in many different keys and many different modal contexts. I had one other thing I was going to say about that. Take this from me again.
So I asked Keith the other day what sort of place he was in, and it sounds like you were really depressed and lacking drive when you wrote this piece. And I'm curious if you'd like to share about that with the audience, or how that might have affected your process and how that might have affected what they hear tonight.
Yeah, so yes, I was feeling very depressed. I was, again, this was pre-pandemic that I wrote this, but I was still very isolated, even despite not being holed up in my apartment for reasons of quarantine. I was kind of just holed up in my apartment because I had no money to go out and spend money in the big city, and I didn't have any real work yet. So I was just at home all the time, and just sitting with my thoughts and sitting with just reflecting a lot on my musicianship. And being a big fish in a small pond is and then going to being the smallest fish in the biggest pond in the country is really jarring, and just feelings of inadequacy, that feeling of being what's the term, imposter syndrome, just like, oh, I don't know why I ever thought I could move out here. I can't make it as a musician in the big city. And so all of that I just channeled into this. I just very, very angry at myself, not at anyone in particular other than myself, just wishing I had more control. And so you'll hear many different passages within this piece that go from the beginning of just very gently breathing and bringing life into the piece, to these very, very chaotic sections of really disjunct motion at times. And it flips back and forth very, very often, just as I was flipping back and forth between those two things very, very often. So I think that musically and aurally, it definitely represents how I was, what my mindset was at the time.
Okay, who has the score now? Okay, keep it moving. Keep it moving. Don't be a hog. And so tonight, I would like to tell you a little bit about the piece. For me, it feels like it's kind of like I start out in this like hazy, almost classical prelude style. Like I'm just sit down in church and I'm like, okay, church is gonna start. And then it develops, and then all of a sudden, there's more movement, and it's all sort of avalanching to a point, and then there's a few areas where it has this feeling of slipping or falling, and that happens in conjunction with a lot of dissonance, some dramatic dissonance that occurs. So during these and so that occurs, and then it goes into almost like a little peppy organ thing, and then it goes into the frantic section, which you'll see in your program notes. You'll see a bit of this. And so the frantic section is extremely virtuosic, extremely difficult to play, and it's possibly the most difficult passage I have ever attempted to play. So along with that, and then after that section, we sort of go into almost like what I think is like a video game section, almost like you're a video game character walking through a forest or something, which then evolves very quickly into this lush, dramatic, full ending, which I feel like the ending's very regal sounding. It sounds very grand, and I just feel the whole piece is an extremely grand organ piece. So, Keith, why is the piece called Boxes?
What a wonderful question. Multiple reasons. First of all, like I said, I had just moved to New York City, so very literally, I was surrounded by boxes. A tiny apartment in Bushwick, if you're familiar with Brooklyn at all. I just didn't have space for anything yet, so for a very, very long time, I just kept everything in boxes. I knew where everything was, and I knew how to access everything, and that's really what mattered to me. Until I realized when I unpacked everything and found a place for it, that was negatively contributing to my mental health at the time. Having a place makes you feel like you have a place in the space itself. So lesson learned. Always unpack as soon as you can when you move into a new location. But also at the time, just feeling like I was, I called it Boxes. I don't mean to just kind of diminish it at all, but I kind of just named it that because I was like, I feel like I'm trapped in a box, and I'm gonna name it Boxes, and I see boxes around me. And so at the time, there really wasn't all that much meaning to it, but in retrospect, I can definitely add a lot more meaning to it. And I think it's something that we all do. We all, we tend to or maybe I shouldn't speak for all of us, but I tend to hyper-focus a lot on just very specific things, specifically in relation to my skills. I focus really hard on one thing until I burn out, and then I'm like, well, I can never do this ever again. Like, why did I do this? And then I move on to the next thing, and I hyper focus on it until I burn out. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes as of lately, I feel like I've been doing a better job not burning out afterwards. But like for example, growing up in Massachusetts, I was actually a carpenter. My dad owns currently a very small drywall construction business, and worked with him for my entire life up until moving to New York, actually. So first 20-something years of my life was very much in this environment. And I always felt like I just didn't, I loved the work, I loved being with my dad and having that experience with him, but I never felt like the environment itself was for me. The people that were there were for me. It's just a lot of very angry Irish and Italian men who'd been doing it for 40, 50 years, who just yelled at each other all the time. And that's just the way that they would talk to each other. And I was just this scrawny little 13-year-old on a construction site. I definitely shouldn't have been on a construction site at 13 years old. But yeah, but really wanting to make that work, and it just not being the thing for me. And what I've realized is that it's not that doing that wasn't for me. It's not that being a musician at the time and just moving to New York City wasn't for me, and it wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It's just I put all of my stake into just those specific things at those specific times, instead of fully letting myself experience everything. And just for what it was, taking it as it comes, and then going with the flow, you know?
Well, thank you for sharing that. That gives me a little bit of a glimpse into what it's like to be a composer, and I feel like there's lots of, like, composers are sort of seen as these, like, untouchable people, or like, you know, like the Liszt or Beethoven genius of the composer, and yeah, so it's very nice to know that there's a human, a real side, just like anybody else would experience. So I think, unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I think that we have just time for like 2 or 3 questions, and of course there will be a reception afterwards where you can locate the composer and harass him. So any questions by the raise of hands? Or comments? Oh, and say your name, please, if you'd like.
I'm Dee, thanks for coming. I'm just wondering how you came to write for the organ as opposed to maybe a trombone or
I actually get asked this question quite a bit. In the past couple of days, I've been getting asked this question quite a bit. So I am not an organ player at all. I am not a piano player at all. Like Noah said, I'm a vocalist and I'm a trombonist. But my main focus throughout college was music education. And so I had no choice but to learn a little bit of everything, and generally understand how every instrument works to a certain extent. So I generally know the practices of writing for organ, and one of the best pieces of advice I was given by one of my current choir directors in New York City at First Presbyterian Church, Michael Shakes, very excellent organist, is I sat down and was asking, I wanted to write a piece for organ and brass quintet, sorry, I had already written a piece, but I wanted to go back and I wanted to just make some engraving edits. I said, is there any are there any resources that you can recommend to me? And he said, yeah, ask an organist. I was like, oh, okay. And so it's when I'm asked to write a piece of music for a specific instrument, it's just, sure. I'm gonna write something. Tell me if this is possible. I wrote for just a bassoon solo, no accompaniment. Someone named Mason Adams, who's based, I believe, is subbing in the Chicago Symphony right now. Just solo bassoon. I can't play bassoon for the life of me. I tried. I cannot. Can you play bassoon? Yeah. Can anyone play bassoon? No one raises their hand because no one can play the bassoon. But I wrote a piece and sat down with Mason, and Mason was playing it through just live in front of me, and just stopped. And I didn't really know Mason all that well at the time, and said, "This is great. Can we look at this part?" I said, "Can you not play it?" And he said, "No, it's fine. It's just not right now. And I said, it's okay, you can tell me that it's not possible to play this. And eventually, years later, he said, yeah, I thank you for rewriting that. It just wasn't possible, I didn't know how to tell you. And I was like, oh, well, thank you for telling me. Writing for organ, how I specifically came to write this piece for organ specifically is because Noah asked very nicely. But yeah.
I also paid money. That's an important part of it. Is I did pay some money forward, and I would add that So I keep on forgetting. I also had commissioned piece from Keith for organ and brass quintet. So we were able to talk about writing for organ there. So you've also had experience, and also I've sat Keith down on an organ bench back when I used to be his choir director and showed you what to do. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Or comments?
How long did it take to write this piece? Thank you. How long did it take to write the piece? It took, so I started it in about September, and I would say that I sent you the final draft probably around Christmas time, right? Is that true, or is that over-exaggerating the time frame?
I have to go through my email history.
I would also have to go through my email history. I want to say it was anywhere between 2 and 4 months. Who knows? Who knows how time passes? But most of the writing, in terms of the time frame, most of the writing itself, the initial conceptualization took place probably within a few weeks, and then it was just going back and making it playable, and also making it make some sort of sense, give it some sort of structure.
I would say it's still not done because the composer didn't make changes that I wanted him to. So maybe after this performance, there will be a revision.
Oh, look at this. Is that the time already?
We might as well call time now. So if you have more questions or comments or things you'd like to share, please find the composer at the reception afterwards. We're going to take about a 5-minute break, and then we will start our concert. I think there's still coffee too. So there is still coffee. Get yourself some coffee.
So good evening. Turns out I was waiting for Noah. Noah was waiting for me. So, good evening, wonderful people. I am Olaf Baumann, one of the pastors here at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Tonight, we meet on the traditional territory of the Klalan people. We ask God's blessing on their community so that they thrive and prosper and continue to be a blessing for this land and for all people on it. So gendered and non-gendered bathrooms are straight down the hall, and an emergency exit is right there on the west side of the sanctuary, close to the chancel area where it says exit. Then we ask you to please silence your phones and please do not make any recordings. And please, after the concert, join us for a reception with a charcuterie board and apple cider. So we are really happy that you're here for this organ concert for the benefit of United Way of Clallam County. I have the honor, the true honor, to be a board member of United Way and support its mission to fight for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in every community. United Way is an organization that does a lot of good and that provides financial support to many agencies that try to create a better and more healthy life for all people in our county. And I thank Christy Smith, the CEO, and her staff for her dedication and her passion with which they make a difference in our region. And there is a little red donation box outside, and we would be grateful if you would be generous and fill it with something. But instead of talking about donations, I better give you a check.
Thank you so much.
So I'd like to welcome Keith Sisterhan, who came here all the way from Brooklyn to be with us tonight. We will hear his piece Boxes, which premieres tonight. Thanks for coming and thanks for sharing your work with us. Please check out the program notes with more information about the pieces we hear. Thanks for Tim on the sound. And then I would like to thank our Director of Music Ministries, Noah Smith, for all the hard work, dedication, and creativity with which they put this evening together. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Christy Smith, the CEO of United Way of Clallam County.
Thank you, Olaf, and thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate the generosity of our community, but also of the time that Pastor Olaf gives to us as a board member, and the time that people give to advocate, and volunteer throughout Clallam County. If you don't know about the United Way, we offer a way for people to give to any nonprofit that they choose, or they can choose to give to our community fund, which we use to then re-grant out to nonprofits in our community. Right now and in 2023, our major focus will be on housing, surprise, surprise, childcare, another surprise, and employment. So those are the things that we have determined are the most important needs in our community, and so we're working to make impact grants and also use your donations to make a difference in our county. If you didn't realize, since the pandemic started, the economy has changed a lot. And so our nonprofits are seeing more people who need more help. Food banks are seeing more people coming to visit. Inflation is up, and people's wages haven't kept up with that. So as you're thinking about the end of the year, please consider being generous with whatever you have, whether that's giving money or your time, or just advocating for change in our community so that everyone can live a better life. Thank you so much.
This is a multi-movement structure, so there may be a brief pause between the movements. You'll know when to clap. I'll give you a nod after this one. How about that? Okay, so I am next going to play a piece by Arvo Pärt. I've been playing this piece for a very long time. It was one of the pieces that actually made me want to learn how to play the organ. This piece features a technique that's very just relaxed sounding music. It's kind of ambient if you're into that. So I encourage you, you know, we've had lots of notes and all this fancy stuff today. I encourage you to, you know, just sort of for this next one, tune out, let your mind wander, and go ahead and relax a little bit. You know, maybe close your eyes if you'd like to. It's more of a meditative, we're gonna get a little break, you know, our brains need a break. There's lots of stuff, especially after that last one. So just go ahead and relax a little bit for this next one. Thank you. Thank you all again for coming. And now I'd like to present the world premiere of Boxes.